Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very special show, Not Badger, or just Not Badger. It is a compilation video of some of our listeners' favorite bits and baubles from our weekly content. This week we'll be looking at Polecast number 58, Rantzerker number 52, and the Ragening number 30. I will start now with, let's open up with the Ragening, shall we?
Alrighty, I'm glad you have a sense of humour. Bye-bye if you haven't.
There's a lot going on in his mind that he's not quite allowing himself to express.
I'm just finding these things sort of interesting. So this is what that he's not allowing himself to express. I don't even understand what that's supposed to mean.
He's tender towards his mother and his little sister. He likes women a lot, as friends and not just as lovers. This makes it hard for him to live with the sides of himself that seem focused on some pretty awkward priorities.
Well, it may seem like, he may be uncomfortable with himself, but living with these awkward priorities, that he's a mammal? You realize that they have the same priorities too, right? Oh, I see what she's feeling sexual desire for his girlfriend's girlfriend. That's normal. I mean, if you really want to avoid that, I guess we need to live in a strictly sex-segregated environment. But it seems sort of really mean-spirited to insist on a sex-inclusive environment and then also insist that men be ashamed of the sexual feelings that are going to happen when they engage in friendly interactions with people of the opposite sex. It's just inevitable. I mean, it might be totally inappropriate, but why should he be more ashamed of that than the urge to fart on that couch? Like, is he ashamed? Oh my God, I have to fart. I guess I shouldn't eat in those extra Brussels sprouts. I'm such a horrible person. Like, that's another urge. And yet, I doubt he's more ashamed of that than he is of holding in a fart than he is of holding in, a boner. And why? Why should he be?
He's haunted by the idea of a rapid, meaningless encounter, possibly with one of your very best friends.
Really? Okay, I think you might be extrapolating your own experience to the experience of all men. But I'm pretty sure that men can pay very, very close attention to things.
Yeah,
especially when it interests them.
And sometimes it's just a little sort of misdirection trick, and sometimes the sound is too low because I just didn't check it against anything, and sometimes the sound is too low because...
This is like watching someone angst over wanting to steal a kiss from their love, the love that they had in like middle school. That's what this guy is doing. Because I know from experience what's in her head. I mean, I am also a woman. And believe me, what is in my head is probably terrifying compared to what's in his head. And I'm actually a little bit, for a woman, I'm fairly prudish. Like,
Yeah.
3/4 of Y gallery is no-go zones for me. I make sure that my filters are always updated. Oh my God. Some of that shit is, oh my God. I'm not kidding when I'm talking about pictures of men fucking the decomposing corpses of 4-year-old boys while eating them.
Yes. You consider it prudish to be disgusted by that. In a world full of adult women who get triggered by clapping, I think we have a QED. But, point taken. Both sexes have an upper extreme boundary of sexual deviance that would shock anyone below it.
But no, far from it. He truly is nice.
Thank you! Was that so hard to say? Without then unsaying it, using some weird Gnostic plasticine sophistry.
He truly is nice. It's just that niceness isn't what we might think it is.
You were so close.
Whenever we aren't able to be fully ourselves.
Fully ourselves? Look, it's true some men do repress their feelings, but who are you to say they're not being themselves? Maybe repressing feelings is an intrinsic part of my personality. Maybe that siphoning process works for me and I'm perfectly happy that way. I'm an actor, darling. I'm not being myself unless I'm being someone else. I say things more honestly if I say them in a silly voice. If a man tells you he's being unfairly discriminated against by the legal system because he's a man, be prepared to take that seriously. If your reaction to that information is, that's impossible, legal systems never discriminate against men, blah blah, patriarchy, blah blah, privilege, blah blah, wormhole, rape culture, wage gap, then you are exactly the kind of crazy in whom a dick should not be stuck. There is a considerably reasonable probability that you will end up making shit worse. Yeah, I keep wondering how you got this past the feminists, and especially that ending. How are there not armies of them up at your face saying, how dare you tell women to whore themselves out like objects for the satisfaction of men's predatory desires? Then, unfortunately, you've also hit a wall on the anti-feminist side. My 2 cents is that ain't gonna fix shit, son. Magic vagina juice will not solve your problems, no matter how convinced you are that it will. It's just the MacGuffin, dude. It's just the fucking MacGuffin.
That is my final analysis.
Find someone who listens. Not just someone who believes. Like, preferably someone who does shit, but, you know, one step at a time. On and up. And over. And through. And throughout. And about. And among. And amongst. And amidst. And around. And at. And maybe in.
All right, now that that's over with, let's take a look at Rantzerker number 52.
Yes, it's like this is the average guy, feminists. That they the idea of raping someone actually is really abhorrent to them. Even if it's consensual, if it's just rape play, it still was bothering them. I can't imagine, like, if I was a guy, or from what I've heard, did you imagine a guy getting a girl naked and then on her panties it says, what is that thing that they put on the panties? Don't rape me.
Oh yeah, no, I'd be
might
like,
as well be a chastity belt there, lady. You're never getting laid with those on.
boner killer. Holy shit.
Yeah, I gotta be somewhere else now. But anyway, it's like the normal guy is not and would never think of that. And even the just remotely going towards the idea of rape is really difficult for a lot of guys mentally. And here you are pumping this toxin of rape culture into the atmosphere.
Experiences as women or gay men. When it was my turn, I said, I'm here to offer a man's point of view on gender. My instructor smiled and said, well, you must love our textbooks then. I looked at the syllabus and saw Masculinities and The Men and the Boys by Raymond Connell.
So he's there to offer a man's perspective, and they said, oh, you must like our books. Here's 2 of our books by a trans woman who came out in her fucking 50s, right? A woman who was socialized against her gender identity, right? Who was forced to swallow masculine socialization and enculturation against how she identifies, right? Came out at age 50 and now writes about how bad masculinity is, right? And that's a man's fucking perspective.
The feminist pointed out, no, actually, this is rooted in the same patriarchal institutions that are harming women. It was subtle, but profound.
They're not patriarchal institutions. They're just gender roles.
Oh my fucking god! Everything is rooted in the institutions that harm women. It seems like all roads lead to female victimhood.
They are all rooted in the same institutions. They are, okay? I'm willing to grant that, but that isn't the institutions could be patriarchal or they could be matriarchal, right? They can be, there is nothing inherently evil about men being in charge. There's nothing about patriarchies that created gender roles. Gender roles create patriarchies under certain environmental conditions. That's all it is. You're applying the causality backwards and blaming men for the whole fucking shebang. You are implying that there is no circumstance on the planet under which men could be in authority over anything that would not create injustice and oppression of women. And they said, like, so literally a waitress with a high school diploma and a woman living in Saskatchewan with a degree in frickin'
environmental design.
That's it. You know, like, so nothing to do with sociology, nothing to do with political science, nothing to do with any of anthropology or anything like that, right? No training whatsoever, and somehow watching a handful of videos, right, presenting the other side of the story, and they dropped feminism and all of its doctrines, and they're maybe not men's rights activists, but they are, you know, I no longer call myself a feminist, right? And I should probably forward those on to you whenever they mention you, just to make you feel good, but I'm lazy, so I don't tend to do that. But there are people specifically mention you, and specifically mention the Doctor, and specifically mention Teal Deer and Sargon and all kinds of other anti-feminist bloggers or feminist critical bloggers, vloggers rather. But that's all it takes, right, to deprogram a feminist and bring them over, and, you know, we just have to present the other side of the story in an open forum.
Yeah, just a strong breeze, that's it.
Yeah, we don't have to freaking stick you in a fucking classroom
for like 6 years.
For 6 hours a day for like 4 years or whatever, right? Reading nothing but feminist propaganda. Oh,
you're getting stink eye every day if you disagree with single iota.
Yeah, then you learn what's what.
Now, and last but not least, Polecat Cast number 58.
The conclusion is always based on the information that I have. So it's an analysis of the clues that I get from everywhere, except, let's say, if somebody doesn't talk to me, I can't take what they don't say into account. So before that, before I would have had the opportunity to talk to her, my opinion was that, according to evidence, it was a PR stunt. So she called me out. She says, no, I call out your ethics in journalism. You're not a professional. I said, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a reporter. I write for the Ralph Retort. And she says, no, but then, okay, if you want to show that you're really professional, tell me what's your real account. What's your personal account? I didn't tell it to her, but yeah, I have a separate personal account, which I barely use, because what I write is actually based on my character of feminist flow, feminist period. And so I can't separate that. Basically, my kind of business is my character. So to me, it showed that she doesn't really understand social media at all. She doesn't, and even herself, she has two accounts, actually. One is Candace, Social Corner. The other one is Candace Amber. I'm not sure where the Amber name comes from, but I've seen her use it in some other place. And it's protected. And she follows about 100. She wants, basically the idea of her site was to unmask anonymous people, but she has a site, a Twitter account that is under an assumed name, not a nickname, but just a different name than her real name. Yeah, and then she wanted me to apologize to let me interview her. And to me, that sounded like a Kafka trap. Like, if I apologize, she might have said, okay, I see you have no ethics and you'll say whatever I want to hear to get the interview, so I don't let you interview me. But I went the other route, and I said, because at that moment, the thing that flashed into my head was a video by Mr. Mitoker, where he said, never apologize to these people because they'll ask for more and more and more and step over you. And so I said, sorry, but I won't apologize. Sorry, I won't apologize for having an opinion on the internet. You've got a chance to change my opinion and many others, so it's up to you. Because if she never talks to anybody, there's no way that she can change their opinion and even mine. So I would have given her a fair interview. I even sent her some sample questions that I wanted to ask her. Like, why did she try to hire, she puts 5 different ads to hire unpaid interns on April 6th. So yeah, 20 and plus, because some numbers vary. So at least 20 unpaid interns for both Degree 180 and Social Autopsy. Yeah, and almost I felt bullied when she asked me to apologize to get the interview, which is strange coming from an anti-bully activist.
That's true. It's actually I've run into that before where there are people who have requested or demanded that the honey badgers apologize for sharing up. They're not even really bullying. They're just considered bullying by these people, where they're simply sharing their opinions and they don't like their opinions. And then when they say they don't like our opinions or the things we talk about, we say, well, you know, if you want to come on the show, I'd be happy to bring you on, and then you can make your case, and we'll see, you know, like who's got the better argument. And then they say, I will only come on there if you apologize formally for your behavior, which basically means that you are admitting that you're wrong before you even have the discussion. So, and then I said, no, we're not going to apologize for that. But yeah, that happens.
Nowadays, if I speak to my friends in real life and I talk about feminism, social justice warriors, or Gamergate, they look at me funny, like I need a tinfoil hat, like I'm talking about a UFO conspiracy or Bigfoot. And I think that's what's happening right now to Miss Owens, is that she all found out everything like in a rush over the course of 2-3 days, and it's blowing her mind. She thinks she found like the proof that UFOs exist or that Bigfoot exists, and she's talking to it on Twitter every day. And now she sees conspiracies everywhere. Each time she hears a rustle in the bushes, she thinks it's Bigfoot hidden over there. So she definitely didn't have the skill set of tools to deal with that. Like most people learn about Gamergate and feminism and social justice warriors gradually over the course of days, weeks, or mostly weeks or months. Not all of a sudden, boom, be thrown in the pool like that.
Do gamers give a shit whether or not they have a choice in the gender of their character? And I would argue that they probably don't ultimately care, but they do like having the choice. So and that's an important distinction, because, you know, you could, like, if you buy a game where you know the character is male or female just from the start, like let's say Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, then people are going to buy it if they want, and the gender of the character may have an effect on their choice. But most of the time, I think gamers don't care, and they just care about whether or not it's fun, because, you know, when you play Star Fox, you're really playing a spaceship, not a fox, because the fox is just the face that's in the ship at the time. When you play, you know, fighting games, you usually get to choose the character. People generally don't care. In games where you get to make your own avatar, then people, you know, choose based on what they think looks cool or what they think is most effective or whatever. I play Dark Souls, so once you're like playing that game, it doesn't have an effect on the mechanics as to what your gender is. And I would imagine, and this is the thing that I want to know, when Rust is making, like, sort of forcing a gender on you, does that impact the gameplay at all? For one, and I would just put that out there. If anybody knows the answer, you know, like, let me know. And then the second thing is, and this I think is, I didn't think so. I mean, obviously.
It has no impact.
No, of course not. And the other thing is this. When guys, and this is about men specifically, with the way the press works, if you are a man that says I like to play male characters, or I happen to play games that happen to have male protagonists in it, the press will deem you sexist because you don't want to play female characters. But if you're a man that likes to play games with female protagonists, or you happen to own Bayonetta and Tomb Raider and fucking X-Blades or whatever, you are still sexist because you're playing video games with female characters so you can objectify them or something. So it doesn't matter whether men want to play women or men in games. They're bad either way. And the same sources in the same places are going to label them as such. So it's not even that that's a big deal. This is what I would guess. I would guess the people who made Rust wanted to stir up a discussion or some conversation. They wanted to promote their game. They wanted to bring more awareness to it. So they did this. They were very loud about it and very public. And then there were a few people who complained, and they used them. They lifted them out. They cherry-picked them from the comments so they can point at them and say, look at these sexists, then what they have to say about our game. But they represent a really small, really sad portion of the gaming community, and we are the really good ones, and you should play our game because we're thinking about you, 50% of gamers who are women. You know,
who might have to play as men now if they don't want to.
Yeah, who may have to play as men now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's like it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, and there's probably them trying to make some money or gain some press, negative or positive. All press is good. So.
Yes, I haven't actually played that game, but I've read reviews before deciding if I wanted to buy it or not, and from the reviews I've read on Steam, I didn't want to buy it. But let's see an actual review from a girl who played 111 hours in the game. So she says, I played this game for so many hours and I loved it. But I'm a girl and I've been waiting for the longest time for them to make a girl character. And when they finally do, I can't be a damn girl. I'm an ugly white guy. What's this BS about it picking for us? What's the point to add girls when you don't have the choice to be one? I will not be playing this game anymore until they fix this crap. So disappointed.
Also, it appears that in every MMO world, if left alone to their own devices at some point, they all turn into communist Russia. So we have to protect our old MMO worlds from communism because the Russians and Koreans inevitably get in there, and the Chinese. And that basically becomes the entire game. So protect your communities from communism. It's a real threat, and it exists in your video games. Because that's, you know, it has been said many, many times, when people want to sit down and play video games, that is not when they want politics shoved up their ass. That's when they just want to sit down and play video games. That's not when they want to be reminded of how... And it's never about, like, something... positive. It's always about how bad they are. It's about how bad the community is. It's about how bad the persons that they're wagging their fingers at is. It's never about, like, you know, we're doing this for you because, you know, we appreciate your patronage. It's always about, while it's nice of you guys to spend money on us, here's all the reasons why you suck as people. You know? And we're not going to be direct about it because we're cowards. Instead, we're going to be really passive-aggressive. We're going to make sideways comments. We're going to change the way we translate video games. We're going to add in a little fucking comic panel that has a little bit about unsolicited opinions on Israel. We're going to do these little, like, cowardly, passive-aggressive little things to the stuff that you love to make you feel like shit for loving it. And then that's what I think frustrates people more than anything, is this, you know, nobody asks for this shit. So.
But Brian, gamers are racist and misogynist pricks.
I hear somebody. Yeah. Yeah.
One man.
One man.
Just one.
Just one.
We
don't even.
One man.
We don't
he
even
is
know that's a
fairly
man.
reflective of every other man.
Yes.
That one guy. That one comment means all men do that.
Yes. Any comment under a in a YouTube or social media platform around feminism is evidence of the need for more feminism. But even if they're just commenting on an innocuous YouTube video for a trailer for a movie, it also justifies the need for more feminism. One man is all it takes. We can't just change the attitudes of most people. We have to make sure that no one ever is ever disagreeable with our views under any circumstances ever. Otherwise, it's a huge problem, and men just hate women. Just hates them.
Yeah.
So, one other thing I want to throw in there about the way that this girl is writing this piece. She starts with the title, "Why Are Nerds So Sexist?" Now, that title does not actually paint any specific gender as sexist. It just says, "Why are nerds so sexist?" So you could, in theory, apply that to both men and women, except that we know better, right? We know that this isn't about women nerds that are sexist. But then she goes and starts saying, well, it is always focused on men, and then by this third paragraph, she says it's been long focused on white men. So she's already gone from nerds to men to white men in the space of 3 paragraphs. Okay, so yeah. Oh, and this is another thing that I thought was really interesting. Pasco explained, we socialize them, so men, boys, to be unemotional, heterosexual, competitive, and dominant. So wait, you socialize boys to be heterosexual, but I thought that when it came to a person's sexual orientation, they were born with it. If they were born with it, they can't be socialized into it. So what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't. I don't understand that statement. That flies in the face of the claim that men and women who are born gay or straight or bi are just born that way and not socialized into it.
I want to piggyback off of what you were saying. Before there were nerds, there were squares. I think before there were squares, there were eggheads. I might have that backwards, but I'm sure before there were eggheads, there was something else. When people started calling people nerds, it was not just a description of somebody whose main pursuits were intellectual. It was a description of somebody who was socially awkward because they focused more on intellectual pursuits than on socializing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't you weren't a nerd because you liked science fiction. You were a nerd because you didn't know how to talk to anybody else who didn't like science fiction. You weren't a nerd because you didn't play football, or like football. You weren't a nerd because you didn't because you took physics or algebra 2 or calculus in school. You were a nerd because that was so much your focus that you couldn't relate to people who weren't doing those things. Just like jocks. You got called a jock if you couldn't relate to other people or didn't interact well with other people or were mean to other people who were not involved in sports. You could be involved in sports and not necessarily be considered a jock. There weren't very many people who would have called me one, and I was involved in sports for most of my high school time and all of the time I was in junior high. And elementary school, although they weren't school sports because I didn't have that. But I got called a nerd, and it was because I didn't relate well to people who were not interested in the particular intellectual pursuits that I paid the most attention to. And I was socially awkward. That was what made you a nerd. I mean, there's the person that would wear the pocket protector that they knew everybody was going to make fun of them for wearing it every day, but they didn't want to get their shirt dirty, and they needed it for the classes that they were taking. It was the person who didn't follow the trends because they were busy paying attention to their academic career, and that's why there was another class of people who were considered intellectuals that were not considered nerds. When we were in high school, when Gen X was in high school, there were nerds and there were preppies. And preppies were not as socially awkward. They were able to relate to people who were not focused necessarily on intellectual pursuits, who were not taking college prep courses and everything, but they were called preppies because they were their goal was social upward mobility. They were career focused, and they were more accepted. They were not nerds, but they had nerdy pursuits. They had nerdy interests. And you have the same now. Anybody that has an interest in things that would have gotten you called a nerd if you couldn't relate to people that weren't interested in them back in the day, anybody that's interested in any of those pursuits gets called a nerd. I'm certain that there's probably another term for extreme nerds that is, like, I think people probably are using spurg the way that nerd used to get used when we were in high school. They're probably using that term to describe anybody who has difficulty relating to other people or has difficulty communicating with other people in a way that other people find acceptable. I've had it thrown at me a lot on Twitter, and I go, I don't know, it doesn't bother me. I mean, it could be correct, it could be incorrect. It doesn't really matter to me. But it sounds like it's being used in the same manner. There's another one, I think emo gets used in a similar manner, and people seem to describe, or people seem to use emo to describe certain types of goths the same way that nerd was described to use different types of intellectuals when I was in school. So I mean, no, it's not it's not being used the same way at all.
These group of men often participate in homophobic, sexist, transphobic practices in fandom cultures, Pascoe added. In fandom cultures, where men who have been denied traditional routes to stereotypical masculinity congregate. Increasing equality and visibility for women and queer people and characters threatens a sphere that these men see as being the one place where they can be dominant, where they can be recognized as masculine. Hannah?
Did Pascoe just describe male feminists? Because it sounds to me like Pascoe just described male feminists to a T there. Honestly, that it, like, the biggest example of that description that I have ever seen has come from men trying to enforce feminist definitions of masculinity and trying to enforce feminist ideology on other men, to the point where I've seen them threaten other men physically for not being feminist or for being anti-feminist or for speaking out against feminism. And, you know, white knighting, feminist white knighting, is a huge manifestation of that. And to be honest, nothing enforces traditionally masculine stereotypes the way the feminist admonition that men need to defend women from other men. That is like the biggest stereotype, and you know, like, men are big and strong and powerful, and therefore it's your job to protect the women around you from all the bad guys. You have to be the one good man. You have to beat them all up. If something bad happens to a woman and you're in the vicinity, it's your fault, even if another guy did it because you didn't stop him. That's totally feminist men transferring their failure onto people they deem culturally inferior to themselves.
Okay. However, the sibling creators of these beloved films have both abandoned manhood since the release of the Matrix trilogy and have chosen to live their lives as their true selves, women. So, They now go by Lana and Lily Wachowski. There's a critical eye being cast back on Lana and I's work through the lens of our transness. This is a cool thing, Lily recently said as she accepted a GLAAD Media Award for Sense8, a new series by herself and her sister. It's an excellent reminder that art is never static. I don't get... So what? So what if The Matrix was made by two guys that turned out to be trans? That... I don't...
Waiting. They're trying so hard for somebody to get upset about this.
I know!
Upset about it, because we don't give a fuck. They had us characterized this whole time. Sense8 is an awesome show, by the way. Go watch it. It's great. But it has Martha in it as a lesbian. Is great. From, Doctor Who, Martha. Yes. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. But it's annoying because a lot of these things, I feel like they are not necessarily malicious. Don't attribute to
malice.
To malice that which you can attribute to stupidity. So part of that has to do with the fact that certain publications have linked people like the Santa Barbara shooter and the Australian guy who's like a free citizen, whatever person, who have neither of them were actually involved in the men's rights movement. But because they were connected a long time ago, like a year or two ago, whatever, since then a lot of it has trickled down, and people see, oh, Emma Ray's protest Mad Max, and they hate women, so they're waiting for us to show those true colors that they know we have about hating trans people and women. It's like, no, we were not the ones that this described. You guys made up a straw man, about us, and now they just keep waiting for somebody to slip up and to prove to them that we are this terrible thing that they've always been saying that we are. But of course they keep falling flat on their face because it's all a lie, and it's just really funny to me.
Yeah, and they keep using this gender shit as like their weapon. It's like they think that they just made the checkmate move. Oh,
yeah, well, this is broadly their clickbait. They won't have any citations.
No, they don't need to do that. They can just say things like sometimes, often, much of the time, occasionally, and that works. People are, yeah, they said it. Occasionally, yeah. Spikes in violence. Okay, whatever. Also, I would like to add that when you make the statement, sometimes we take one step forward, we take two steps back. It's another way of saying that no matter how much work we get done as intersectional feminists, there will always be more work to do. So please keep those resources flowing in because you care about equality, right? We need to keep doing this until we get it right. But we know we can't really ever get it right because we're never satisfied with anything, and we need to keep saying we have a long way to go. Otherwise, the money stops flowing in. I can't write this blog anymore if people don't buy into my shit. I can't lobby at this in Congress. I can't go into office. I can't go into politics. I can't go into journalism. There has to be a constant need for these feminist talking points because I don't have any talents. I'm not good at anything. So I want to complain. But I can't call it complaining. I got to call it activism. And also to go back to the thing about casting stuff, there was a movie that came out in I believe it was the 90s, early 90s maybe, called Last Action Hero, and it was a Schwarzenegger film where he was playing this action hero that ended up in the real world. It's a dorky film, but I really like it. But there's a lot that they were pointing at in it, and one of them was about typecasting, stereotypes. And the villain of that film was a white, ginger British guy who was like an expert assassin killer, and he was very classy and super duper evil. This is the stereotype. Like British men are the archetypal villains of film because they are the group that you can do that to and nobody gets offended. You can do that to them. Look at Star Wars. The whole Empire was English. Except for the stormtroopers, I guess. Even James Earl Jones turned on an accent slightly to be Vader. That's an okay thing to do. You can do that with villains. And oh yeah, side note, little bit of trivia: the guy who played the villain in Last Action Hero, he is the patriarch of the Lannister family on the Game of Thrones. I think the character's name is Tywin or something. So that's how white he was.
Here in this comment, those of us are as their fantasy worlds are being taken from them. Like, that's the other thing. Over and over and over again, social justice ideologues who have been spearheading the social justice invasion into various aspects of what they refer to as nerd culture have said they're not trying to take anything away from anyone, they just want to join in the fun and they don't want people pushing them out. And what does the first sentence of this paragraph say? As their fantasy worlds are being taken from them. So it's clear that they do think, or at least this one does, that being there, that being involved, that including women, that including minorities takes something away from the people who are already there. And it's a goal. It's something that this is gloating. Their fantasy worlds are being taken away from them. Ha 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 ha. Look what we did. That's a goal. And yet after mentioning white males as hatred of women and mentioning a political movement that the majority of women aren't a part of as hatred of women, they've got the nerve to accuse nerds and people in fandom culture. I didn't know there was a fandom culture. There's too many different fandoms for there to be a culture of being the hateful ones. That's pretty sad. It's like somebody got out their projector and started throwing characteristics. You can't have it both ways. You cannot assert that men in bars are responsible for what other men in bars do when there's somebody who takes advantage of another person's passed out state, which it's irresponsible to go to a bar and get that drunk anyway. It's irresponsible to go to a party and drink so much that you pass out on the floor. It's dangerous, and sexual violence is the least of your worries. Alcohol poisoning can be deadly. But somehow feminists think that it's all right to impose a role on men and make them responsible if one of the men in the room happens to be criminal and they don't stop him. That's imposing roles. That's dominating, making men dominant. If you can't be responsible for that and not be dominant. What do they want people to do? Go up and say, I would like you to stop that, but I'm not going to physically do anything about it because that would be embracing traditional masculinity, and I don't believe in traditional masculinity. So I'm just going to tell you shouldn't do that. No, they want men to beat up other men for things that they disapprove. And whether it's something like that or something that isn't wrong, like insulting a woman. It's not wrong to insult a woman. It's not inherently immoral to say something a woman finds insulting. And it's definitely not a reason why some guy should beat up another guy.
I would like to take this time to thank the people who took the time to send us the timestamps for the bits that they liked the most. Please consider doing the same on our videos, and maybe we'll pick a section that you thought was especially poignant and put it up on our next Not Badger show. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the best of the week of April 22nd, 2016.
I got this email from this trans woman yesterday, and she was very, very hostile. As far as men's rights activists and the whole bit, and she grew up with an extremely abusive father, actually stepfather, and she found feminists. She says MRAs are not interested in healing historical trauma of men. That the cycle of abuse and men's rights activists are not interested in that. They're not interested in tackling these problems. And then she went on to say that essentially the gender system was what taught her stepfather to treat her the way he did back when he was, she was a, boy. And her entire thesis that she got from feminism was that this is masculinity. This is what masculinity is. This is what enculturated masculinity is training men to abuse, training men to be violent. And I am blown away at how feminists can take somebody vulnerable like that. This is a trans woman who grew up being brutally terrorized and abused by her stepfather. And they see that vulnerability and they're like, yeah, I can convince this person that this is what masculinity is. Masculinity, cultural masculinity, the culture, the ideals of masculinity, right, are not the ideals of masculinity that my father was raised in, right, where, yes, there is some expectation that you should be willing and capable to mete out and absorb violence to protect your wife and your children, not to abuse and terrorize them, right? And to protect those weaker than you, not to abuse and terrorize and bully them, right? This is what socially constructed ideals of masculinity are. These are the masculine virtues, that you are strong, you are stoic, and the whole idea that her father was socialized and enculturated into normalized masculinity, right, that led to him choking her and beating her and terrorizing her mother and all of these things, right? That's not stoicism. That is a man who is completely not in control of his emotions, right? That's not masculinity.